Hey, gang. Hey. Welcome, everyone. I've been looking at the comments as you've all been waiting. Pretty incredible. I just love how people come in from all over the world. Um, Hello, Seattle. Hello, Orem, Utah. Hello, Wisconsin. Hello, Belgium. Super cool. Hello, Philippines. Uh, Feels a little bit like virtual choir again, doesn't it? Um, Really, truly welcome, everyone. Uh, it's an honor to have you all with me here this morning. And this, I think, is as long as we're in lockdown, this is something that I thought maybe we could start to do. That we can explore music together. We can sing it. I'll do what I'm calling a deep dive, um, and we'll just kind of see where we go with all of it. It's funny this morning as I was getting all set up, and I've got the computer all set up and the microphone and the looking at the sheet music and thinking really about, okay, how I'd like to talk about all of this. I really felt this like a black cloud of dread descending onto me. I don't feel this way about music, of course, but it's because this piece and the piece that it's part of, Child of Wonder, this piece that we'll do this morning, and then Sacred Veil, the much larger work. Oh, it's so personal to me, and so I'm not sure I can describe it. One of my best friends in the world, a guy named David Noronha, who's a terrific actor, once told me that he thought that I was a method composer. You know how there's method actors who have to, if they're going to play, an, a car salesman, they have to go and train to be a car salesman so that they know how to do it. Or Daniel Day Lewis, who spends 5 years learning how to make shoes so that then he can use it as a part of his role. When I compose, I think I have to go there. I really kind of get into the bones of the piece. And writing this piece, the Sacred Veil in general, but then specifically this one, Child of Wonder, I really had to go there. I think I had to find a way to grieve while I was doing it. And then once I'm finished with the composition and it's done and it goes to print, then there's some separation, there's some distance. But then this is actually really a very new piece for me and kind of the first time I'm doing this. And I was I was surprised at how quickly I fell back into it, that I really felt that feeling, the sense of real grief. Um, so what I thought we'd do this morning is let's just explore the piece a little bit and see where it leads us. We'll sing, of course. For me, when I compose a piece of music, when I compose a piece of music for choir, everything is about the text. I mean, really everything. It's the alpha and the omega for me. And so I thought what might be nice for us this morning is to start with the poetry. So, everybody ready for this? My wife, you remember Laurence from Belgium? She's got this. There's a saying in Antwerpish. I think it's "tit voor de bladertje." I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but basically it's time for tears. Yeah, so here we go. So especially all of you who are like me on the west coast of America, and it's only 11 in the morning. Like, okay, all right. Um, I wrote this poem. Tony wrote, I think, 5 of the movements of the 12 movement work. Tony Silvestri. Oh, guys, you're not hearing me so well? Let me see if I do this. Is this any better? If I talk into the microphone, how's this? Um, yeah, it's a super sensitive mic, but I've got it turned up. Maybe this is better. Um, how's this, gang? A little bit better? Anyway, hopefully this will work. So, oh, better. A little better only. Okay, well, guys, thank you. Thanks for bearing with me. Let's try this. I can literally just crank the... How's this? Any better? Any better? Hello? This has to be better. I'm sending a lot of... there we go. Perfect. Somebody says better, not beer. Well, a beer's not a bad idea about now. So, way better, everyone says. Now it's loud. Okay, well, sorry, everyone. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so let's take a look at this poem. As I was saying, Tony Silvestri, one of my best friends in the world, and the man who together we've written Sleep. He wrote the poetry for Sleep, for Luxarumque, for Leonardo Dreams of His Flying Machine, for Saint-Chapelle. I think Tony and I have done almost a dozen pieces together over the years. We've also known each other for 30 years. We met in college choir. And Tony lost his wife, Julie, to cancer 13 years ago. And we went into that world to write about this piece. It's so brave, and I have no words for what Tony went through to make this piece. And I very much wanted to be a humble servant in writing the music and making the entire the scope of this story, of telling this story. And when we got to this, Child of Wonder, which is actually the last movement of this 12-movement work. Also, I'm realizing some of you are coming to this brand new, so let me just tell you a little bit about it. The 12-movement work of the Sacred Veil starts with, it tells, first we meet Tony as a young man, and then he meets Julie, his wife, his former wife, and they fall in love. They dream of having children. They have children. There's the diagnosis. This is about halfway through the piece. There's the struggle and how to live as a family and with her children. Then there's the real struggle. And then finally, there's the moment of her death. That takes you through movements 1 through 11. Not an easy journey. And the 12th movement, this is kind of a benediction. And when I was working very, very hard on all the music and putting it together, this and one other movement, I really thought there's no way I can ask Tony to write this poetry, that it's so personal. And really what I was hoping to do as the creator of the music and of the poem is to give him a path to grace. I don't have a word for it. I didn't know what else to do as a friend, but this poem. And because it's so hyper personal to Tony, you'll see that there's a number of places where I actually quoted our world together. So if we start with just this opening line, these opening lines, child of wonder, child of sky, time to end your voyage, time to die. Silent slumber calls you, dark and deep, child of soft surrender, child of sleep. So even from the very beginning, I see this poem as a very delicate way of ending this person's voyage, and at the same time trying to approach it with the same honesty that Tony did with the rest of his poetry, which is just unvarnished. That it's not filled with feathers and light. It's not dressed up. It just is what it is. Just say what it is. And the second line, then, silent slumber calls you dark and deep. This all quotes the piece Sleep that we wrote together. So any of you who have ever sung Sleep know that the final lines are, what dreams may come both dark and deep. That's Tony quoting Shakespeare in that moment, because he had replaced the words to sleep that were originally there. So I took his poetic intention, dark and deep. And then you remember, as I surrender unto sleep, as I surrender unto sleep, the last lines of Sleep. And so I embedded them here. And when you finally are able to take the full journey, which I hope you'll all join me when this is released August 28th, you'll see that it's not just Julie's story. Julie, who's such a beautiful soul, and some of her poetry is included in the piece as well, but it's Tony's story as well. I think sometimes in these moments of profound grief, we forget about the survivors. And because Tony is my best friend and so close to me, I think I saw what he was going through for year upon year. Ultimately, it's a wound that never really heals. It's just an open wound that you learn to live with. Anyway, it's difficult to talk about. So starting with this first line, or these opening lines, let's just talk about the way that it's set to music, okay? See if I can get the microphone here. So, Child of Wonder, super simple, right? and all moving in this Faubourg style where everybody moves together at the same time. But buried even in those first notes is something super important, and we'll get into this if you stay with me as we go through the journey of all these different pieces with Sacred Veil. But I chose early on this number of threes, and I'll go into it later on. Why there's this incessant repetition of the number three in all the structure of the piece. Even here, you'll see that there's three basic movements in Child of Wonder. But more importantly, Julie's motive, Julie Silvestri's motive, that it's the very first thing you hear in the entire piece is, so it's three notes, right? Up a third and down a third. And so I've spoken quite a bit during Sing Gently about how the altos are by far my favorite part. Sopranos, please don't get offended. You get all the glory anyway. But altos always get the leftovers, and so I'm always trying to give the altos super meaningful lines. And in this case, the altos line, very simple. It's up a third. The entire piece, by the way, it starts in C minor, and then it moves all over the place, but almost always when it's moving up a third, or sometimes up a third this way, or here and then down a third, or here, and then there's some dissonance, but it's usually up a third or down a third from what I call the veil, this C that's here. So why don't we, just for the heck of it, since we're all here and there's a bunch of us that are singers, let's start with the alto line, will we? Can we? And why doesn't everybody sing the alto line? It's unbelievably simple. You ready? Here we go. 1, 2. Child of wonder, 3, 4, 1, 2. Child of sky, 1. Time to end your voyage, time to die. Now pick a note when we split. You ready? Child of soft soul, you see that? And altos, you see how you still retain even at the end of that line, up a third, and also there's three notes. Julie Cedar. I want to see if I can do this. This is a new platform I'm using. Can you all see this? I hope you can. I love this. Altos, the meat of the sandwich. That's right, altos. I always think of altos too as the curry on the rice. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So it's that simple. But then within that, there's this recurring theme. You know how I love dissonance, and as a way to illuminate emotion or to convey very specific emotional ideas. So also when you sing Child of Sky altos and you're with the sopranos, right? And we sing, and you get, there's that to there. And then I just love the idea that it sits there. It's not going anywhere, and it certainly doesn't resolve. For me, in a very real way, that's how I see this kind of pain. There isn't a real resolution. There's going to be a grander resolution, but that the sting of this, it's here. It just becomes a part of us. So why don't we try, just for the heck of it, let's have everybody sing through. You ready? Let's see what happens. 1, sing. 3, 4, 1, 2. And altos there. 1 off. Good. Then and then we open it. And incredibly simple, right? Just as simple as I could possibly make it. And then we go to the next phrase. So now this is where everything starts to open up a little bit. Child of sorrow, child of rain, there is no tomorrow, no more pain. Turn your silvered sail toward the light, child of morning, child of night. So Tony and I talked a lot about this idea of the veil. He has this incredibly beautiful vision in his mind of what that veil is. And as I mentioned before, I represent it as the middle C everywhere in the piece. But for Tony, it was this idea that in moments of birth or death, that there's this veil, this ribbon of energy that separates the world of the living from the world of those who have passed, and that veil gets incredibly thin. We even talked about there are these places called thin places, right, in the world, where there's this idea that we're just close to that other side, that other dimension, whatever it is, and that it's not necessarily that you could communicate, but that other person is right there, just right there, and that in that other place, time as we imagine it or know it, it doesn't exist. I don't know if it's timelessness. It's probably something we simply can't conceive. I don't know, by the way, that I necessarily believe all of this as an ethos. I just find it so profoundly poetic and human. And the way Tony wrote about it touched me so deeply. In some ways, it's what I hope it's like, but I don't know. So that was this beginning here. So that there's no tomorrow, and there's no pain. That it's free of all of this this struggle and this suffering that comes on this side of the veil. Then these words: turn your silvered sail toward the light, child of morning, child of night. So Tony not only wrote lux aurumque, which means light and gold, he also wrote nox aurumque, which means night and gold. So I embedded it here that we get toward the light and child of night. And I love the little wordplay with child of morning, spelled, as you'll notice, mourning as if over the death of a loved one. And I really like, just as a poet, I like silvered sail. I love the alliteration there, and that the S of that sounds to me like this beautiful funeral boat just gently sluicing through the waters. So let's look at that little bit musically, shall we? Let's see, where is it? It's here. Great. So let's do Child of Sorrow. So then my idea was, I wrote this, I don't know how many different times and how many different ways, and I thought I'd make it all complicated. And at the end of the day, what I realized is, nope, I'll just take the bases away. Let's just make it without gravity, in a way, in this moment, right? So we sing, and that's all that's there, right? We just take it away. And now the tenors have it. They've got that bite. By the way, so this is something that I love to do, because tenors in that register, they've got much more of a ping, just in a compositional way. And then what you give, if you've got the altos down there in that low part of the register, they've got that nice warm, what Anton Armstrong calls the mama tone. They've got that beauty. So what you get is between the two voices, and then I find that register right there, in terms of that kind of piercing dissonance, if you combine the altos and the tenors around that range, it's about as good as it gets. So let's go back to Child of Wonder or Sorrow. You ready? And Child. 1, 2. Going on. And then now the basses enter. And Good. I hope, are any of you out there singing along with this? I'm not sure if you are. So that you know, too, in terms of composition, there in measure 27 basses, when you enter, child of silvered sail, to me, I think in terms orchestrally of the different colors of the choir and different vowels and humming and open singing and basses in this case, in the orchestral version in my mind, when you finally enter, this is when all the cellos and the strings come in, and you just feel the thing twice the size. I also love this little bit, altos, when you've got on silvered sail, and then, so that of course is that echo from here, right? But it's taking that second verse and now it's slowly lifting it so that over the long period of the piece, what you do is you start here, and then you're slowly, because we're heading here, and then finally up. So it's just a slow way. It's something I learned in Juilliard, and for the composers out there, it's called background counterpoint. The idea that you can also have a gesture or a series of notes that are suspending and resolving over long periods of times, just here, like stepping stones. Good. Okay, so by the way, we'll sing this all the way through when we get to the end of it, but now let's go to the final verse. I really have to share with you. It's when I see these words, it's incredibly intense for me, and I just realized I've had a chance to conduct it now a few times. The entire piece. It's not easy. It's certainly not easy for me as a conductor, but I know now the singers that I've worked with, and we did it a couple of times here with the Los Angeles Master Chorale. They're extraordinary, and that's the group that is on the recording. And then also with my professional group, the Eric Whitacre Singers in London. And then I did pieces of it with different choirs, but I'll tell you, it's not an easy journey for the singers either. And this verse especially, we'll go through it musically in a moment, but just the way that it finally opens up, and I think there's a real sense of release, or at least I hope catharsis. So this final verse, child of iridescence, child of dream, stars and moons will guide you down the stream, stretched on ocean waves of endless foam. Welcome home, my child. Welcome home. I'm sorry. It's funny because my wife, everybody who's in virtual choir remembers Laurence, my wife, and she's up in the other room, but I think she might be listening to this. I think she's taking down questions that if any of you have for me, she'll pass them on to me and I'll answer them in a bit. She's from Belgium, and I think she would hear me like choking up like this. She'd be like, I'm too European for this. I hope you're listening to this, baby. Okay, so child of iridescence. First, I just adore this word. I love everything about this word, the sound of it, the meaning of it, and the uplift in this third verse. Child of iridescence, that suddenly it's almost a being of pure light. Then child of dream, as if it's an echo of an echo of an echo that this person lived and reverberated in the universe and will live and live and live through dream, through these infinite echoes. And then stars and moons will guide you down the stream. This is a very direct reference to what I believe is the answer to the meaning of life. And I always believe the answer to the meaning of life is row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. I really think that's everything one needs to know to make it through the world. And that's a very specific reference to that. And then stretched on ocean waves of endless foam. This comes from Tony's favorite work of mine. The piece that I've written actually isn't one of our collaborations. It's a piece with poetry by Octavio Paz called A Boy and a Girl. And any of you who have sung that knows that it begins stretched out on the grass or stretched out on the beach. And then they say savoring their oranges like waves exchanging foam. And so all of that is a reference to this, to that poem, and as direct a way I could of communicating to Tony this deep, deep meaning and this profound friendship that we have. Also, a boy and a girl it's in a strange way the perfect summation of what we're talking about here. And then finally this, welcome home, my child, welcome home. And I won't get into it too much because this will all make so much more sense when we do home in 2 weeks. We'll do the same kind of thing, but the third movement of the piece is called home. And the idea is that the only lyrics in that it's the moment of first love is you feel like home. And that home representing not just the person that loves you and you love, but just the place to finally rest. That is home. And it's what I really hoped for, both for Julie and for Tony. So let's sing this, shall we? Let's sing this last verse. First, if we can, why don't we just take and break up the parts a little bit here so that we can learn them, because it gets a little trickier. Ready, soprano? Let's go from Child of Iridescence. Just sopranos. 1, 2. Star. And then 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Four, 1, 2. And then finally, so for the composers out there, I also want to point out a couple of things. So I remember I talked about the veil being that C. So at the end of the piece, sopranos, you find your way, as do the altos and the basses and tenors down here, to that C. And then that holds as we repeat. You'll hear this in the recording. I don't think it's in the standalone sheet music, but then we get, as it began, this kind of wheel of fate that turns. So then within that, there's a couple of nice things maybe to point out. So the first is, sopranos, my idea was this, that first, do you see how you've got a minor third? A child of 1, 2, 3. You see that? So there's that iteration of 3 down a minor third, 3s and 3s. But even better, what I love about this is, I think all over the world, when a mother calls for her child, it's usually, Eric, Eric. It's done in a minor third. I don't know why that pitch is like that. I know very famously Honda cars used it years ago. Honda. And there was a whole write-up about it, about how they were sort of like, that it was pretty cheeky that they were using one of the most primal instincts one has to listen and to come to their mother. They were using that same melody, but that's embedded in there. And then remember how I was saying that Julie's theme, 3 notes, up a third and down a third, right? So then when sopranos, when you sing down the street, and the idea that even here, even after her death, even as the boat is as far down the stream we can barely see it anymore, that we hear the echo of Julie. We hear her theme reverberating through infinity. Altos, let's go through your line, shall we? 1, 2. 3, 4, 1, 2. Then we go. And then and finally good altos. Good. Also, I'd love to, for all the composers out there who are listening and anybody who's thinking about writing for singers, one of the things I love to do is to try to give everybody their own melody. That so even the altos, you hear it, they're filling in a lot of harmonies in a way, but also there's a decent argument to be made that they've got as much of a melody as the sopranos do here. And that what I've discovered over time, and if the voice leading feels like a melody and takes you up and takes you down, that the singers by the end of the piece also have a sense of catharsis in it. So it's not just this broad thing that they've been a part of. They actually have the sense that their musical material has evolved over the life of the piece. Basses and tenors, why don't we take you guys together? By the way, we did a lot of this in Sing Gently, but for any of you who are new and are studying music theory right now, and they're constantly telling you parallel fifths are evil, evil number one right here. Please tell your theory teacher that was true until 1750, when Bach died. And even then, there are countless examples of perfect fourths and perfect fifths before we started formal counterpoint in the 15th and 16th centuries. And so these days, a perfect fifth is perfectly fine. In fact, for me, it's the only way that you can get these big, these warm, lush movements. It's really the only way that can happen. Also, I'm a bass, and I find for myself when I'm singing down there low, like, so for instance, in this part, child of iridescent. Oh, is that so satisfying to sing there as a bass and then to have the baritones above you? Oh, so nice. Let's sing from Child of Iridescence. Ready? Tenors and tenors. No, you know what? Sorry, let's do tenors alone. It's worth it. Ready? 1, go. 3, 4, 1, 2. 2, 3, 4, 1, and. And tenors, you'll hear a lot of that, right? Those repeating thirds here. And then this that you, on Dream, in measure 40, this doesn't appear in this movement, although it does in the piano part some. But when we get to the final work, when you're listening to the final work, this is a motive that's related to Julie's theme. But this thing appears everywhere. There's a movement called magnetic poetry that's... You actually hear this and there's oftentimes this is a recurring motive over and over. And for me, I won't get into the weeds with it here, but it's kind of Julie's journey plus fate in a way. and tenors, that's what you have in that moment that where you, and I love, 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 by the way, for the composer nerds, where in measure 40, so tenors, you're singing, right? But then altos are singing. So what you do is actually cross paths. You see it, and we get, and it's, you can't really hear it in the music, but the alto color and the tenor color are different. And so when you have a choir together, you hear one motion up, one motion descending, and it kind of, it's just got this beautiful forward momentum and stasis at the same time. Good. Okay, so basses, let's take a look at you, all right? On the surface, this is just going to seem like a whole bunch of low notes, but you've got to know that more than any other part here, you're integral. Like without you, without this foundation, none of this happens. A perfect example is like when we sing Down the Stream, right? So everybody else is going, this one. All of this that's happening, but basses, you're down here, and what that does is it causes that, you hear how it changes the notes? That's one thing. So besides adding the harmony, in my mind, what all those basses, and especially that perfect fifth does down there, is it activates this whole cloud of overtones above the piece. And it makes the melody more than just the melody as it soars. It makes it shimmer. It kind of surrounds it with the light of overtones. So here we go, bassist, ready? Child of iridescence. Hear that? 3 notes going down the third, going on. Ready? Stars. Then we open up. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And now we condense. Ready, basses? And then finally, excellent. So we tried this with Sing Gently, and it works okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to sing to the recording of this and to the video. It's not the same. It's really not the same. But I find that instead of us singing along to my plunky piano parts, hearing voices in your ears, it just changes everything. So even if you're just softly singing along at home as you do this, I feel there's something in the brain and the spirit that makes you feel like you're part of a choir. So let's try this right now. Let me see, how do I do this? So I'm going to do this. We'll go here. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to take this. This is a new program for me that I'm using. We'll share the audio here. Great. Let's try this. Okay, and then we'll start back here. Everybody ready? Before we do this, before we sing along with this, gang, just one last thing. So the video was made by another one of my best friends in the world, a man named Mark Royce, and he's a brilliant photographer. If you haven't checked him out on Instagram or on his website, he just has the most extraordinary aesthetic eye and technique. I mean, really one of the greats. And knowing that we were going to release this, I asked Mark if he would make a video for it, and he listened to the music, he looked at the lyrics, and then he went out to Malibu where this is shot and just set up his camera and captured the most 5 beautiful minutes of a scene at Malibu. I think it perfectly captures what's happening in the music. So that's what's happening in this official music video. Shall we sing through it? Let's try this and see what happens. Here we go. It's unbelievably emotional for me to listen to all of this, especially with all of you. I really wasn't prepared for how intense all of this would be. So first, that's the Los Angeles Master Chorale singing, and I composed the piece for them. I was artist in residence with them for 4 years, and this is one of the pieces that I wrote during that time. It's Lisa Edwards on piano and Jeff Ziegler playing cello. The recording sessions also that we did them in January, right before lockdown, the end of January, and that was also just a profoundly moving experience for me, and I hope for the musicians as well. One last thing to point out musically is you notice I don't think in the sheet music that you downloaded, that's just the standalone, right? But if you have the whole score, then you hear that all of this, which is from the beginning of the piece, the very beginning of the Sacred Veil, it repeats, and then you notice that we get at the end, everybody's here, and everyone drops out except sopranos, altos, cello, and we're left with that C with only the veil. Only the veil is left. I'll go into a much deeper dive into the composition part of this in some other YouTube videos that we do like this live. That's it. So I'd love to take some of your questions. If Cynthia is, what are you saying? You're saying, please don't feel embarrassed about your emotions, Eric. That's how and why your composition is so beautiful in the movie. Thank you, Cynthia. I have to say, it's not that I feel embarrassed about them, although I know I'm showing it. It's that I feel embarrassed. I'm still not used to this idea of just sitting alone in a room and I'm just talking to the comment section, right? I'm trying to feel all of you. I don't think I will ever get used to not being in the same room as a group of people. I so desperately miss just being in a room with people and a room full of singers and instrumentalists and just making music and talking and sharing all that information that happens. So part of it is just, there's part of me that just feels absurd sitting here this beautiful day in Los Angeles and just getting all weepy at my piano, staring at YouTube. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so here's a question. I'm going to post it here. So Heather asks, so how does this work? Do we record a video and send it in? I'm a first timer. Okay, so Heather, unfortunately, I think I know what you're implying. This isn't a rehearsal for another virtual choir. We just finished the last virtual choir 6, and it was a monumental effort. I mean, truly monumental. It took a team of over a dozen people, months and months to make it, and not to mention 17,572 singers who were all part of it. And so this one won't be a virtual choir. This is just a chance to explore the music and to sing along. I know it's not the same. I know you're alone in your room. You're like, what am I rehearsing and what am I doing? I think what I'm trying to find with all of you is what's a beautiful way for us to get together and somehow have an experience while we're in this strange pandemic time. I hope that helps. It does feel like we're in a room together. I agree. It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, and I see other people saying that too. I love this, Heather. I love that you say this. Let's see. So, biodegradable glitter. I love that name. How on earth do you prepare yourself mentally for this in a performance? Yeah, it's. I found that during the rehearsal process that it was best to really deconstruct the piece. That we would do several measures here and several measures here, and kind of break it all up, and never do the long version of the journey until right towards the end. And then during performance, there's kind of a steel will that has to happen, especially, believe it or not, this is not really, I wouldn't even count this in the top 3 or 4 most emotional moments of the entire Sacred Veil. There are some moments of the Sacred Veil that are absolutely heart-wrenching in a beautiful way, but also in a difficult way. Yeah, I think yeah. Run out of words. Let's see. So Kathy asked, do you have a schedule for each of the future sections you will do with us? Yes, I do, Kathy. So I think I even put it in the comment descriptions of this, but I'll be announcing them coming up. It's 2 weeks from today. We'll do Home, which is the third movement from Sacred Veil. And then I think it's another 2 weeks after that, we'll do You Rise, I Fall, which is one of those movements I was talking about that is absolutely heart-wrenching. The poetry that Tony wrote for it and the kind of the way that the singers sing the music. We'll do those 3. Then, I don't know if we've scheduled it yet, but on August 28th, that's when the full album will be released. And I want to do a listening party. What I'm hoping to do is we can get together like this, we'll talk about it, and then we can all listen to the album together from start to finish. And I can be writing and commenting on it, but I just thought it'd be a beautiful thing for us all to experience the album in real time together. Yeah, good. Thank you for all of your incredibly warm and generous comments. In terms of questions, baby, have you written anything down?
Yeah, a lot of people are asking about the scores where they can get them.
About the scores?
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are asking about the scores, where to get them. So I think also there's a link down here on the bottom of this YouTube in the description. But also I've got it posted all over my various social media pages and also my website. What's beautiful is Sheet Music Direct has set this thing up where usually you have to buy at least like 10 copies of something because mostly choirs are buying the sheet music. But they've set up this beautiful thing where you can buy individual copies and you can even buy like the bundle for these three movements coming forward. Also, you'll be able to buy the score very soon. We just finished it, so the score will be in print as well. It's so right now you can get it all through Sheet Music Direct, and you can download it immediately, which is so great. Yeah, somebody's writing "You Rise, I Fall" is September 5th. That's right. And then is the full score with the cello and extended piano available? Yeah, I see that, Joshua. I'm just going to put you up there because I just love this. I love this feature. Yes, it is. Like I was saying, literally yesterday, I signed off on the final changes to the score. My engraver is a guy named Raymonds who lives in Finland and who is an absolute wizard. And I only bring up Raymonds right now because it's such a shout out. I can't tell you how many revisions I've made to this score over the past 2 years. I cut whole movements. I rewrote things. I did this to it. And Raymond's just endlessly making sure that the score looked beautiful and incorporating all those changes and giving me great advice on things. Other questions?
A lot of people are also asking about the piano solo work from Sacred Veil, if that would come out or will that come out and where they can find it.
Yeah, so people are asking about solo piano versions of the Sacred Veil. It's funny you mentioned that because I talked a lot about Laurence is off screen. She's the one reading all these comments, and actually, I realize I don't need to have these headphones on. That because I sat here for years. Yeah, I'm sitting at my piano, my beautiful Yamaha, by the way, and I can remember there's a beautiful moment that I can't wait for all of you to hear called "Delicious Times," and it's this moment where Julie, with her small young children, she writes about having to cut her hair, and it's just this sweet, tender, kind of funny the way she writes, and it's the most extraordinary poem. But the tune. And then it's so all of that is a long way of saying that I think there's a lot of room for a kind of a piano version, and maybe I'll play some of it, maybe record it and upload that. I don't know, but definitely I'll release some sheet music for just piano. Baby, anything else?
There were two people, Leslie Rudolph and Umeshu Chuhai, asked, why is there a double bar at measure 37?
Why is there a double bar in measure 37?
I think more people were also asking about it.
Yeah. So I will tell you, but let me see if it's a mistake before I tell you. And the reason I say, yeah, so you'll see there's also one at the end of measure 19. And the idea for me is this is the architecture of this movement is very clear, right? There's the first two stanzas, then we repeat, then we repeat. But the idea here is for the singers and for the conductor to see the architecture of the piece. And by putting in that double line, it just lets you know this is a new section and this is a new section. And that makes a lot more sense when you get into the entire Sacred Veil piece, because then you can see very clearly, all right, here's the next part. Babe, any of
everyone is sure on who the poet is.
Yeah, so Laurent says not everyone is sure who the poet is. Yeah, so the poet is Charles Anthony Silvestri. Tony, I think, wrote 5 or 6 of the 12 movements, and this is ultimately his story. I spent years and years and years talking to Tony about this. As we put the piece together, we realized that we desperately wanted to have Julie's, his wife's, words in there as well. So 3 of the movements are Julie's words. things that she wrote, and then I set to music. And then there are two of the movements, including this one, the one we just did, Child of Wonder, where I wrote the poetry. So I guess there's three poets, but ultimately this is Tony's story, Tony and Julie's story. But Tony was the one guiding this from start to finish.
But the poet of this piece?
The poet of this piece, Child of Wonder, is me. I wrote the poetry. I'll tell you in a I've been composing music a long time, so if I premiere a new piece, and I definitely feel some vulnerability whenever I release a new piece and think, oh, is this going to work or what? But I think I've been doing it so long that that I'm not so tender about it. But I rarely release my own poetry, and so this is a new thing for me. It was hard even watching the video and watching the words that I'd written go by. Not only because it's my own poetry, but because it just means so much to me in terms of my friendship with Tony and my friendship with Julie, who I knew really well. There's something about the power of the word that somehow strikes me in a different part of my heart than the power of music. Baby?
Paula Saint Pierre is asking if the album has the 12 movements.
If the album has the 12.
And when will it come out?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm missing all these questions. I would love to put... Oh, wait, I see it. There it is. I'm going to put it up. Hey, Paula. Will the CD have all 12 movements? Yes, it will. Absolutely. So, and this will also be on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon. You'll be able to stream it everywhere, but you'll be able to hear the whole movement or the whole piece, all 12 movements from start to finish. And if you're really interested in this and ready to take this journey, I really am asking you to start from the beginning. Like, set aside 55 minutes for yourself. Start at the beginning and follow the poetry from the start all the way to the finish. It's really a journey, and it's cumulative, and it requires kind of an intense concentration and to fall into the world. And the words are at least as important as the music, if not more. So if you get it, please follow along. The CD comes with this beautiful booklet and all of these things. The streaming too, I'm sure we'll figure out a way so that people can follow along the words while they're listening streaming. But then also, as part of the album, Tony and I did a really deep 20-minute interview, just the two of us talking about the piece and how we created it and what it meant. And that will go on the end of the album. So if you're interested, you can also hear Tony and I really diving into the piece that way.
And then Judy A, but a lot of people are asking, not rhetorically, how do we sing without crying?
So Laurent says, Julie A is asking, sorry, Julie, I'm not seeing there's so many comments going by. It was way at the beginning, but how do we sing without crying? And asking not rhetorically. Yeah. I don't know. Every performance I've done with this, somebody is really having a tough time, and lots of people are having a tough time. One of the things that I was unprepared for, and I think Tony was unprepared for too, was how many people have gone through the struggle of cancer, very specifically cancer, not just grieving, but have the sixth movement of the sacred veil of the whole thing is called I'm Afraid. And it comes from the words that Tony said he remembered hearing the doctors say when they got the diagnosis, which are the words no one ever wants to hear, which is, I'm afraid we found something. And then the rest of the poetry for that movement is just a litany of Greek and Latin, the diagnosis, right? It's just the doctor's diagnosis, and here's the treatment. And so as they talk about all the different kinds of chemotherapy and the metastasis, so many people that when we've been performing the piece live literally recognize the words from either their own experience with cancer or watching a loved one go through cancer. And so every time I've done this, there's at least a few singers who are either in the midst of dealing with this right now or have just gotten through this, or it was years ago and they just still, they've kind of kept it down, and then suddenly, boom, it's reawakened. Yeah, it's not so easy. Ultimately, what I'm hoping is that it's incredibly honest. I'll talk about this more when we get into the bigger part of it, but a lot of people are saying that this is my requiem. The thing for me about requiems and some of my favorite music on earth, the Mozart requiem, the Duruflé, the Fauré, are requiems. But requiems for me are really at a distance. There's a pageantry to them, and the liturgy of them keep them this way. What Tony and I wanted to do, and I think the poetry really reflects that, is we wanted to get as close to the fire as possible. We wanted to tell the human story. And that doesn't mean make it over dramatic. That just means make it honest. Just here is what happened and here is how it felt. And yeah, you don't see that oftentimes about this kind of subject. John wrote this. Part of the power of choral music is the combination of the words with the music. I couldn't agree more, John. In fact, I think that's 99% of it. I have this half-baked theory that somehow by engaging the word part of the brain with the music part of the brain, that it's a whole mind experience, and that it can transform us in ways that very few other kinds of music can. Other questions, baby?
There's one that is, people are trying to answer the question how to not cry when singing. And Sempre Gumby says, sing without crying. Think of Chihuahua.
I'm going to put this up just because it's so great.
That is awesome.
Yeah, Sempre Gumby, Gumby, Sempre Gumby. I always like this. Always Gumby. Sing without crying. Think of Chihuahuas. I'm pretty sure you spelled Chihuahuas right. So bravo, good sir or ma'am. And second, not only do I think this is good advice for pieces like this and this piece, but also I'm thinking that's a great title. Sing without crying. Think of Chihuahuas. In fact, I think if you put an exclamation point on it, that's a marching band piece right there. Am I right?
And then Catherine Panic says, sing and sing and sing it over and over until you don't cry on the outside, but just on the inside.
Yeah. So, Catherine, did you say is her name? Yeah, sing and sing and sing it over and over until you. Yeah, I think that's definitely maybe a way to do it so that you don't cry. I will say though, I spent 3 years on this in every possible way I could, and I still tear up when I'm conducting it. So, yeah, at some point, I think there's a. Laurence and I always talk about. She's a professional soprano, and we talk about there's a professionalism that also comes with the singing, and at some point you've got to just do the job. I always think that you can think of that from a spiritual place, which is that your whole goal as a performer is to take the audience and take them on a journey. And when you start to weep yourself, you lose them. You lose that connection. And so even if it feels involuntary, you have to steel yourself against that and think of them. Think of taking them along the journey with you.
That is really great.
Thanks, baby.
And also, your colleagues will love you if you don't cry.
Laurent says, that's really great advice. And she also says, and also your colleagues will love you if you don't cry. That's really true.
Someone starts, then everyone.
Yeah, that's the worst part with a piece like this. If someone in the choir starts to cry, maybe you've been in one of these things and everybody starts weeping. And you can't make music like that. This is a nice question. Was there a segment of Child of Wonder that was most difficult for you to write, either lyrically or musically? Oof. Yeah, so I'm honest to God, trying not to choke up. There are several of them that were as difficult for me to write as anything I've ever written. But this one that I talked about, the one that's very simple, that goes. It's called Delicious Times, and it's so simple. And that's the one where she's just speaking about being brave for her children while she cuts her hair off and making a game out of it and being there for them, all the while knowing that there was a very good chance that she wouldn't be there for them. There were several times when I couldn't do it. I really had to leave the room. I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of her words and the emotion. A bunch of Tony's poetry, too, really struck me right in the heart. And then finally, in the 10th movement, which is also Julie's words, she had written a letter to all of her friends and said, I just got this news today from the doctor, and it looks like I've got about 2 months to live. And what I'm asking for all of you tonight is to pray hard. Don't don't pray that everything will be okay or that I'll have a peaceful death. Pray for a miraculous recovery. Pray for supernatural intervention. I'm not religious, but I knew Julie well, and hearing her words, she was so proud. And in any other circumstance in her life, she would be mortified to ask anybody for anything. And that she got to this place where the only thing left was to reach out to her friends and family and say, help, just help me. Sorry. That reading her words, you'll see when this whole thing is finally released. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful, so human. Yeah, that wasn't easy.
Is there time for one?
Yeah, maybe one more question.
This is a nice question from Peter Lu, but a lot of people are asking about it. What is the perfect size of the choir? Is it meant to be a big choir or a small ensemble? Like, what's your ideal size of a choir?
That's really interesting. So Peter is asking, what's the ideal size of a choir for me? Should it be a small choir? Should it be a large choir? Well, I'll tell you. So when I did it with my singers in London, we did it with 24. There were 24 singers. Perfect. It's the perfect size choir. Then when we did it with Master Chorale, Los Angeles Master Chorale, and we recorded it, I think there's 40 singers. Perfect. It's slightly bigger, but the moments where it needs to have this, they were able to turn on the gas even more, and so also worked. Then when I premiered You Rise, I Fall, which is just the 11th movement of the entire work, and definitely the most difficult to sing. That was also performed by the Los Angeles Master Chorale, but the entirety of the Los Angeles Master Chorale. At the time, there were 120 singers on stage. And that was one of the most powerful performances I've ever been a part of. So it's a long, long way of saying, I think the piece can withstand all sorts of sizes of choirs, as long as the intention is always as intimate and close to the bone as possible. Then I think it can. I've got in my mind a version of the piece that would be for string orchestra, piano, maybe two pianos, and a large chorus. So take the same work, but then just make it a little more cinematic. So it's just got a more breadth and depth. And I think it can work. I think it can retain that's almost like an oratorio, but that it can retain the sense of closeness, of intimacy. Gang, I'm looking at the time now, and it's 10 minutes after 12. Maybe that's a good place to stop, yeah? You're all amazing for joining me here today. I'm humbled to spend the time with all of you, and grateful that you were all here. And let's do this again. August 15th, we'll do Home, and you can download that sheet music from Sheet Music Direct. We'll read through it, we'll sing through it, we'll play the recording. It's the complete opposite of some of these other movements because it's only about love. It's just pure love. And I'll really get into that. Maybe I'll have Laurence come and warm us up and talk with us as well during all of that. But thank you for spending this time, gang. And be well. Be well out there. Wear a mask. Please just wear a mask. Don't do it for yourself. Do it for everyone around you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And be well.